All right. If you recall, a few weeks back, we were running a poll on our Instagram about should we discuss LIV Golf, right? And what is happening between LIV Golf and the PGA Tour. So we decided to invite a famous journalist on the program. He is the author of the book Unplayable, an inside account of Tiger's most tumultuous season. He's a journalist all across different golf outlets, and that is Robert Lusetich. Robert, Mike, Leon, Nick Saveri, thank you so much for hopping on the podcast with us today.
Well, and thank you for reminding me about how famous I am. I'd forgotten.
Hey, listen, I mean, you told me to say that. So listen, Robert, I got a question.
Off mic, man.
Yeah,
off mic.
Right. Well, that's right. He did say off the record. So I have a question for you at the top because, you know, I mentioned to you off air that we're kind of a news and info podcast. And what we cover is news making headlines, whether or not they enter into the sports realm. We've done a few topics such as, you know, the Brian Flores lawsuit with the NFL. And in this particular case, our audience is very interested to understand, you know, not only the PGA Tour angle of this, but how this startup league in terms of LIV Golf came to be. So at a 30,000 foot view for the people, I like to give them the airplane view here. Can you explain the trajectory of how LIV Golf came to be and this ongoing battle between them and the PGA Tour and what it's over?
Yeah, well, I mean, essentially it is a hostile takeover. That's really, it's an attempted hostile takeover. The PGA Tour, which ironically pretty much did the same thing to the old European Tour and the smaller tours in the world. They just basically said we're the world tour, and then all the great players came here, moved to Florida, didn't pay state tax, and everything was great. Well, over the years, there has been some players who have thought that they should have more say in the way in which the league is structured, because you don't have owners like you do in the NFL or in Major League Baseball, where the commissioner really is representing ownership and the players are a separate sort of entity. The players are the owners because they're independent contractors, which ironically we'll get to in a minute, but that is the core of the argument, which is to say that LIV's argument is to say, if they're independent contractors, they can play wherever they want, and we're going to pay more money for them to come and play with us. And so essentially that's, you know, that's what's happened. Don't look for this to make any financial sense, because it makes none. It's essentially the Saudis committing $3 billion, I heard the number to be and that's in the first round of funding, to this idea of getting a seat at the table. And a seat at the table right now, there's only one seat at the table, right? It's the PGA Tour. So the problem with this idea of compromise is any compromise is a loss for the PGA Tour, because they've got all the marbles. Now you know they don't need to share. But ultimately, I believe that there will end up, I think, being a compromise. But essentially, what LIV is saying is that we can do it. We can have another tour. They're not going to wipe out the PGA Tour, but they want 10, 12, 14 weeks a year, and it's going to be their weeks. And the tour, of course, is going to have to explain to 10, 12, or 14 tournament sponsors why there aren't that many big star names at their events. And now these guys are going to ask themselves, well, do I want to write a check for $10 or $12 million when I get a lot of journeymen showing up at my event? So there's a lot of kind of balls up in the air right now with the way it's been presented. It's been very aggressive. Phil Mickelson obviously came out as really, along with Greg Norman, the spokesman for it. And of course, we know that he got himself into some trouble with some remarks he made to journalist, my colleague Alan Shipnuck, about the scary MFers that are in Saudi Arabia, and that obviously didn't go over well on either side, on the PGA Tour side or on the LIV side. So there's a lot going on. There's a lawsuit. Ultimately, I think what LIV is going to try to push through is, as I said earlier, 10, 12, 14 weeks a year will be theirs. They'll have their event, and you can still play on the PGA Tour if you are a member of LIV Golf, which right now you cannot.
Robert, currently the U.S. Department of Justice is investigating the PGA for antitrust violations. what do you make of that? You know, and is that a viable argument that DOJ is making about what's going on with the PGA?
Oh, it's a very viable argument. I mean, they're like I said, you just can't tell someone they're an independent contractor, and then when they go to play in an event that's going to pay them serious money, like serious money, in multiples of 2 or 3 times what they were making on the PGA Tour, and then tell them they can't play, and then say now you can't come back and play on the PGA Tour. So I think that there is definitely going to be something that is going to have to change, and the PGA Tour, they've got to be aware of it. They've got an army of lawyers. They know that they've had a cozy little arrangement for a long time. So because there hasn't been, it's like, there's no one's coming to take on the NFL, right? But what if they did? The closest thing to this that I think we can point to is in the attempt to create a super league in Europe amongst the football team or soccer teams, but that take the best clubs and then say, why are you, if you're Barcelona or Bayern Munich or Juventus, I mean, do you really want to play some little team every other, most weeks? How about we just play the big teams and we make big money and we sell huge TV contracts? And then, that's the sort of model. And then they've modeled it after Formula One. So there's another sport that has a different approach. This idea, I actually think that the team idea, if they got rid of the stupid Mario Kart names they gave them, would actually have some potential, because if you could get, let's say, a Red Bull or a Lexus, and these sponsors come in and take a team on, I think that's got some legs, because I think people could get interested in that. That's the sort of that Ryder Cup type of mentality that you don't see a lot in golf, because it's team play and match play. So I think that there's merit in it, but of course it's been a dog's breakfast, as we say in Australia, in the way it has been rolled out. I think they're making stuff up as they go along, which might be the nature of the beast, but still, it doesn't look good. And I think it was just, they had to know when they got involved with Trump and putting, going to his courses. And I understand they're looking for courses, they need venues, but they had to know that guy's not taking a back seat. So when he's, when they have the event at Trump Bedminster, is it any surprise that Marjorie Taylor Greene and Tucker Carlson show up and they turn it into a rally? And I don't know how that is going to bring, average fans in, because it's so polarizing. Whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, I don't think anybody wants to golf to get that political, because it's golf, right? We don't need to know your politics. It's just, this is golf. We like to watch golf. So, there are just so many unanswered questions.
Robert, I wanted to play a clip for you of something I heard earlier today on ESPN's First Take as we're recording this. And it was from Stephen A. Smith, obviously, and he gives the best hot takes in the business. And I'm using air quotes for people watching on YouTube. But I thought it was a little bit not understanding what's in a PGA Tour membership and why the PGA Tour is so opposed to players going to play over there. Let me play the clip for you, and I want to react on the other side.
The United States government, their number 2 trade partner, from what I've read, is Saudi Arabia. I'm pretty sure it's safe to say there's U.S. corporations doing big business with Saudi Arabia. And suddenly individuals are looking to get paid and everybody's in an uproar. I thought this was America. I thought we were a capitalistic society. I thought competition breeds our greatness. That's what I thought. Tiger Woods is sitting there acting like the PGA should be the only game in town. When do we say that? You got the PGA banning cats from participating. You got Tiger Woods supporting, feeling like players betrayed the PGA. What you owe the PGA? What you owe the PGA? You work, you produce, you go out there and you earn your money. They don't pay everybody. Winners get paid, losers don't necessarily get paid.
Now, Robert, here's my problem with that. Okay. And I saw somebody put this on Instagram, and I told you I obviously worked for one of the tour's international properties prior. If you've been working at a pizzeria for 50 years and a competing pizzeria opens up across the street, and you want to work at both pizzerias, and you ask the pizzeria you work at, can I go work over there? And they say, no, you either got to work here or there. You can't work here because we're a private company and they're a private company and we're competing against each other. Am I oversimplifying that? Because that's the way a PGA Tour membership works. Jay Moynihan has said this on the record. You don't need us. I thought you don't need us. So go play over there. Why do you need to do both? Am I oversimplifying it, or is it more Stephen A is a little bit more accurate about what he just said there?
First of all, I used to do Stephen A's show quite a bit when I was at Fox Sports, and I can tell you that he doesn't talk like that when he's off, when the cameras are off. He's quite a reasonable guy. Anyway, there's no screaming. Look, the point he makes is a valid point. You can't, if you're going to say someone's an independent contractor, then it's as soon as they've come to your event, they can go work in the pizza shop across the road, as long as it doesn't, would you be able to fire the guy just because he works across the road is the question, or prohibit him from working there. And I think that ultimately, this is again going back to why is DOJ involved, because they do look at this and say, well, it's restraint of trade. You could say it's restraint of trade. Now, listen, I've said this from the get-go. Who's getting rich from all of this are lawyers, and there's going to be some very rich lawyers on both sides, because ultimately this is going to end up in the courts, and these questions will be resolved by courts, because I don't see the tour changing its view, and I don't see LIV changing its view that you shouldn't be banning our players just because they've signed a contract to come and play with us. And again, there's going to be as many, people are going to look at the same set of facts and in different ways. And so far we've already seen that. And there are plenty of people who, he's right in the sense that, Tiger took appearance money. He went and played many events around the world, and he was paid to go there. But the difference is the PGA Tour signed off on it, right? So what I would like to know is, and this is where I believe that we're going to get to a crossroads. If LIV does have, let's say, 14 events, you've got to do 15 to be a member of the PGA Tour, right? That's the stipulation. So you're telling me that somebody like Brooks Koepka, who sometimes I wonder if he even likes golf, forget about loves it. I think it's just something he does because it makes him money. Or, these guys who are like, oh, this is great. I got more time on my hands now. I'm going to play less golf, make more money. Well, are they going to play 29 events a year? Because they're not allowed to pass on any LIV events. They have to play them. So the question now becomes, how are you going to get your PGA Tour membership requirement of 15 with that? That's 29 weeks a year. That's old school Vijay Singh, who played all the time. There's not a lot of guys that do that or want to do that. So I wonder how real that is. But again, we're so, even though we're deep into this process, we've got such a long way to go. The road is a long and winding one, and again, filled with lawyers. So who knows the way in which these things will be resolved? But the history of these things is that there's always a compromise. In the end, there'll be a coming together, because honestly, the PGA Tour probably thinks they can lose a bunch of guys in their 40s. They're not really going to, no one's going to miss Paul Casey. I like Paul Casey, by the way, but these are guys there's a lot of guys past their use by date, and where they're not winning majors anymore. They're not the player they were. That's fine. I don't see that. I think the problem the tour has is that they don't want their people, the loyal members, right, looking over and seeing some guy that they've been beating like a drum for the last couple of years just make $4 million playing in a 3-round event with techno music blaring in the background and a shotgun start. It's that part of it I just don't personally understand. But again, that's the model that they're going for, this idea of bringing golf to the masses. Their front page of their website says golf but louder. And I don't know, maybe I'm just an old guy, but I don't like it loud. I like golf as it is. I like to play 4 rounds. I like to start on the first hole, finish on the 18th green, and I like people to certainly get excited and cheer. But no, I don't need techno music. I don't get it personally. But again, this is something. It's like saying to somebody, you've got $3 billion, which, by the way, the Saudis, I think, I looked at their Aramco profit reports, record profits in the second quarter. So I think it took them all of 4 days to pay for this LIV funding. So in a sense, it's monopoly money to these guys. And so I can see somebody saying, well, what do you care? It's their money. Let them throw it against the wall if they want, and people are getting paid and getting rich along the way. And I listen, it's a free world, but not necessarily in Saudi Arabia. And I think this is where I don't want to hear another word about, how this is growing the game of golf. And I think that is just completely disingenuous. I don't mind if you say, listen, man, they offered me $50 million and that's a lot of money and I took it. I respect that. But you have to expect that there will be a price to pay for that. And there will be people who will not like you much for doing it. And, there's a mother of 2 who a couple of days ago was sentenced to 34 years in prison in Saudi Arabia for the crime of retweeting that women and girls should have rights. Okay, and so that's what you're getting in bed with.
Robert, as best as we can transition here, there was a lot of talk last week about the players only meeting that happened with the PGA Tour. Some big names, obviously Tiger coming in for it. You saw all the memes of Tiger with the red Sunday shirt on. Do you know anything that came out of that meeting? What are some proposals that players on the tour, there's talk of maybe boycott? I have said to people that listen and watch this program, or people that follow me on social media, the way this changes is if tomorrow morning the Masters says you can't play in this tournament unless you're a previous champion, and anybody affiliated with LIV can't play in the tournament unless they qualify through PGA Tour method. If that happens tomorrow, LIV goes away within a year. I think you would agree with some of that sentiment. I want to get your take though on like the players only meeting that happened, and then where do you finally see some of this shaking out? You mentioned the compromise, but where do you put your prognosticator hat on a year from now? We ask you back on the show, is LIV Golf still around?
I think it will still be around because I don't think they've burned through the $3 billion yet, and there might be a second round of funding. There are 2 principals, both Saudis, both very senior in the regime, who are behind this, and they're golf nuts, so they love golf. And that ultimately, don't underestimate the pull of having people within the regime in Saudi Arabia who love to play golf and they want this to work, right? So as for the players only meeting, I mean, look, I don't think there were. I know several players were not invited, so it was clearly a top end meeting. I think probably a dozen or so players, and I think Tiger might have been there to rally them for sure, to stay with the tour, show loyalty. But I think also that Tiger is seeing this opportunity as telling the tour, we've got to change some things. Like the Players Advisory Council, I know players who've been on it, and one, a major champion, said to me, it's a Players Advisory Council because they advise us of what they're going to do. They don't ask us. They just tell us what's happening. And there's been a lot of resentment over the years about that, especially from the senior players. Media rights is obviously a contentious issue as we move into a new technological age, and the players don't feel like they get control of their media rights, and they feel like they should. Now, does that mean that CBS has to cut a deal with Bryson DeChambeau every time he's on a tournament? No, that's absurd, and we shouldn't be looking at that. But should there maybe be they maybe be cut in a little bit more? I would say yes, and obviously the star players are the ones that feel that they need to be getting paid more. You know, there's one thing I can tell you about knowing some of these guys. There's a lot of the malcontents went to LIV, and they weren't happy. So they went there because, hey, yeah, sure, it was easy money. Maybe they're past their prime or whatnot, but ultimately they felt that their voice wasn't being heard on the PGA Tour, and there's truth to that. And the PGA Tour needs to understand that. They're acting like their show is the only show in town, and you know, you're lucky to be here. Well, you know, now it's not the only show in town. So I think that, you know, it's almost like a fever, and golf is in this fever, and I think the fever will break, but you know, I'm not sure, and I think it's not really ultimately it's probably not a bad thing, because a lot of things needed shaking up, and the PGA Tour didn't need a wraparound year-round schedule. You know, that absolutely was just, I thought it was, I never liked it, but what does that do to Asian events? What does that do to I'm Australian? What does that do to events in Australia? It kills them, because you can't get people to come. So other parts of the world really suffered from the PGA Tour sort of lording over golf. So, you know, look, it's easy to pick on LIV because they've done things that I think are kind of annoying and wrong and hard, and just missed. They just misread the room a lot. But that's not to say that the PGA Tour are the good guys in this either.
Very well said there. Robert Lusetich is a fantastic journalist, reporter. You could check out all of his work, various places online, but also check out his book. He was just talking about Tiger Woods. Check out his book, Unplayable, an inside account of Tiger's most tumultuous season. Robert, I can't thank you enough for coming on the program and educating our audience about this topic. Continued success to you, sir, and please stay safe.
Right. You got it. Thanks, boys.